Right, so we've reached a point where we have virtually covered our piece of paper with watercolour. There are a few spaces, but it's mostly covered. And you could stop here with this abstract if you wanted to, because the more you look into it, the more you see. And just being calm and curious and taking the time to look, really look. So I can see here a tree. I can see eyebrows and a nose forming here. I can see another little face down here where I'm pointing. I can see a tree here. I can see movement, some kind of strange galaxy. I can see roots as well. Now, as I say, you can leave it now if you want, and you could put it in a journal and you could come back to it. I find that quite difficult to do now, because as soon as I see the shapes that remind me of things, I want to start drawing as soon as I see a pencil. I've always been like this. I used to spend a lot of time doodling, because as soon as I can see a piece of material or a tool, I just want to get working with it. So what I'm going to show you next is just what I do with some other materials. You don't have to do this, you don't have to do it the way that I do, just play. And if you're interested in seeing what these materials can do, then, by all means, have a go with them. So the first thing I'm going to show you is this white acrylic ink, which is made by a company called Liquitex. And what's nice about acrylic inks is they have these little droppers. And I'm going to find a place where it will show up, the white, and I'm just going to drop some of the white ink on there, just a little. Get the top back on because I don't want to lose it. And then I'm going to take my lid, and I'm going to just put my lid, make shapes with my lid again, but actually on my work this time, to see what effect that makes. At the moment, to me, that looks like a crescent moon. And I really like it. Now, I'm going to take a little bit more of the white, and this time I'm not going to put it on my work. I'm going to actually be dripping it onto the table, and I'm going to just get the edges well covered of my lid so that it's all completely covered in white, and then I'm going to come to my work again with the lid, and I'm going to make some circles, because this is going to highlight areas of my work. If I want to come back and add details, sometimes by highlighting interesting parts that I can see, when I'm just looking. When I come back again, my eye will be drawn to those parts, and I might think, ooh, I'm going to add some detail there. So I can't emphasize enough the value of looking at the shapes on your paper and really seeing with curiosity, with calm, this is a very mindful activity. We can become truly present as we do this. And again, I love doing this so much because it is so exciting to see what the effects will be. I'm going to just dribble some more of the white ink, and I'm going to use my hollowed out biro again I'm going to come off screen to do this so you don't get all my hair in the way, as has been the case in the past. I'm sorry. And I'm just going to dilute this a little bit so it doesn't, and I like the effect of the spray. Another thing you can do is to move your board. I have to try to put it back in the right place afterwards. You can move your board so that the drips flow in different directions. I'm just going to put it back now in the right place. And we're just going to use the heat gun so that our paper doesn't get saturated. And you can see the really nice effects of all the different layers that you've introduced, and the increasing movement and abstraction and the depth that you now have with this extra layer. And the white does add a nice mysterious feel to it. And all the time we're looking for images. We're letting our imagination, the right side of the brain, play. And now that's acrylic ink. That's how acrylic ink behaves. I'm just going to add now some Indian ink. And Indian ink is different to acrylic ink in that Indian ink can be activated with water for reactivated, whereas acrylic ink, once you have used it, you can't spray it again after the first time. But the nice thing about Indian ink is that it behaves in a really beautiful way when you use it. So I'm just going to drop a little bit on and spray the Indian ink. I might spray first in this corner here, and because it is nice to drop the Indian ink into the water and just allow it to do this. And of course, sometimes we have to be ready to lose things that we really liked if we're going to carry on like this. Sometimes we'll lose things, but that's okay, because we'll get new things, which is what life is like, isn't it? Sometimes we lose something, we give something up, and something new and interesting comes. So this is the Indian ink. I'm now going to dry that. I'm going to do some blotting. I'm using a piece of paper towel today to blot with. I'm just going to blot that in places. And I'm just going to show you how the Stabilo pencil works. If you want to add some Stabilo pencil, just very, very gently dragging it over just where you want it, really. I always think these look like beautiful, delicate branches, and I'll just give it a little spray, and you can see how it veins out. Another thing you can do is you can use a watercolour pencil for highlighting. You can do anything you like with it, really. You can draw features of your faces with it if you want, and we'll have a look at that when we get on to the final part, which is the detail part. But I'll just show you what this is like if we draw around a circle with it. You may have some watercolour pencils. And there we have a little highlighted area in our abstract. I'll just do another one here. And because it's still a bit wet, we'll get a nice effect with the edge. So there we have some more materials that you can use, and some different things to do with your background or your picture, if you like. I'm just going to, this area of blue here, I'd like to sort of break it up a bit, so I'm just going to, there we are, put that white circle now. As the painting dries as well, it will flatten, and also as it dries we can see the layers coming through, so we don't entirely lose the things that we liked either. It's all a multi-layered piece of work. Now in the next stage, I'm going to cut this into smaller shapes, smaller pieces, and then I'm going to show you how I draw detail when we get to that point. Now you can see that I've cut my piece of watercolour paper into pieces. And I've got one of the pieces here which looked to me particularly interesting, that I thought I could show you how I create detail on it. What you will find when you cut your watercolour up is that it looks different. The patterns, different ideas come to the foreground. You see it in a completely different way when you actually focus on sections, and also you will have cut through certain patterns as well. So you'll see it all quite differently when it's cut into pieces. And this is how I make the little postcards to send to my parts. I'm just going to show you to start with, in case this wasn't clear in the first video. This is the hollowed out ballpoint pen that I use to blow the watercolour and the ink across my page with. It's just an old ballpoint that I've hollowed out. Now, before we use tools like pencils and pens, I'm just going to show you another thing that you can do, which is to move your marks across the page with a twig from your garden. We've already played with this a little bit in just fanning out some of the watercolour on that area there. And you can see, I hope, that there's a point that I've sharpened on the twig. But what I'm just going to show you first of all is that you can dip the twig into, this is some Indian ink, black Indian ink, and I'm just going to show you that you can actually use your non-dominant hand to make marks. My non-dominant hand is my left hand, and I'm just making these marks with that non-dominant hand and a twig. And this is so good for just if we have a feeling, if we have a manager who says, oh, you know, you've really got to have control, you're never going to get things perfect. There's such freedom in using your non-dominant hand. So I'm just going to leave that there for now. And then I'm just going to put my top back on my ink, my Indian ink, because I don't want it spilling and going over the floor. And I've got here 2 watercolour pencils, but you could use coloured pencils if you have them, or you could use crayons. I've also got here, which I might show you if the mood takes me. These are wax crayons. I'm going to just choose 2 colours of the wax crayons that just, not going to think about it too much, they just kind of speak to me. These are water-soluble wax crayons, and they are made by Caran d'Ache, and they are called Neo Colour. They're lovely, vibrant, bright colours, which you might like to use. I've also got here a little black pen, which is a pen for drawing, and it's called a micron pen, and this is a size 3, but you can take any fine liner marker that you might have and use that for detail. Now, as I said before, you don't have to do this. You don't have to add any more detail. You could just write a message on this, or you could keep it to look at mindfully, and you could look for patterns and faces in it, or you could do what I'm going to do now. It's just something that I like to do, to find some faces and just bring them to life, and with curious eyes, asking them, you know, what exactly do you want to tell me? Who are you speaking to me today? Now, I can see here a face. This to me looks like a nose. It's a face in profile, I think. And here is their mouth. And this person is slightly covered here by something. And I wonder what that is. We might discover. And here is another face. Here's the eye, and here's the nose, and here's the cheek and the lips. I can just see these faces peeping out. I haven't gone to any trouble to draw them yet, but there they are, looking out at me and wanting to be seen. I can also here see a nose and an eye. Now, I've also got a white gel pen, which I might use for a little bit of outlining. Just a white gel pen. I think it's a Signo they have made in Japan. So let's just start with a little bit of very light definition. And I'm going to start with this face here, and I'm just going to very gently, with my watercolour pencil, define the nose so that she becomes more visible. I think it's a she. And then I'm also going to just give the eyelid what I think is an eyelid here, looking at me. I'm going to just give that a little bit more definition. And you can see how a little speck of paint there has become the pupil of the eye. That's wonderful that that happens. Now, I'm just going to take a very small brush just to wet my watercolour. And just wetting the areas, just spreading them out a bit. And then I'm just going to edge sketching where the edge of the face may be. And I think there's a little tree here that she's standing behind. And then I'm just going to, with this grey watercolour pencil, just edge the face like that. And then a little bit of shadow, because so much is shadow, isn't it? The play of light and shadow. And then I'm going to give her, with this wax crayon, a little cheek, colour to the cheek. And just going to block that a little bit. There she is. I'm just going to colour in with this bright blue neo colour so that she stands out a little bit more. And I could Just wet that area as well. And then let that come over a bit, that's fine, that colour, so that we're giving the tree around her a little bit of colour. There, like that. And I'm just going to take my very fine micron and just go over that little pupil. And there she is, and go over her nostril a bit. Just a few little touches. So I'm just going to add some hair before I go on to the next little face. Just changing the position. Just hope that that will give her a little bit more character as well. So that's her hair flowing out. And then we're just going to come on to the face lower down. Again, we're going to use our grey to create some shadow, and I'm just going over the marks that are already there to create this face. Again, it's all about finding the shadows. It's the shadows that define the faces, and it's often in the shadows that we find ourselves. In this face, I'm going to just add my micron pen to just make a nostril and a little pupil that's looking over here, and just get a paintbrush sort of working the grey watercolour into the painting, forming the shadow. And this little character is looking to the side. Just giving them a mouth with the crayon, and just adding a little bit of water. And the thing about this way of finding the faces and then bodying them forth, as it were, this way of doing it, we begin to see what is there, because we're not trying to actually make something beautiful. Sometimes I've seen faces that look afraid, and that makes me afraid, and I carry on getting to know them, discovering why they are afraid. Whereas if I started with an idea of what I wanted to create, I would, well, probably end up creating something very different, because that's usually what happens to me when I do start out with an idea, preconceived idea. Everything changes. It's as if the right side of my brain says, well, no, this isn't really what I wanted to say to you. So there we are. This is the way that I work intuitively. using the right side of the brain to create faces, because faces fascinate me, but you might want to create trees or flowers, but I would suggest that this technique of working intuitively and finding them first in the abstract is such a lot of fun, and it really does help you to play rather than to set yourself a standard to start with and try to come up to that standard. It's really helped me. Thank you. And I hope you have lots of fun playing, even if you don't choose to play this way. I hope that you will discover that creating like this can be hugely liberating.